Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Tel Aviv. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister offers counter-terrorism help to Belgium. New Israeli tech could save your life, and we'll give you a look at the Islamic State on Israel's borders. I'm Denise Wood here with the latest news in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is offering condolences to the families of the victims in yesterday's deadly terror attacks in Brussels. And he's offering Israel's help to prevent future attacks. Netanyahu reportedly called Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel last night to offer Israeli assistance in combating terror. Netanyahu says terror doesn't distinguish between countries, and the two leaders agreed to meet soon to discuss security matters. The Islamic State terror group has claimed responsibility for the series of bombings yesterday at the Brussels airport and a metro station, which killed 35 people. Belgian police have identified two brothers, Khalid and Ibrahim al-Bakraoui, as the Brussels airport's suicide bombers. Their alleged airport accomplice was named by a Belgian newspaper as 24-year-old Najim Latraoui, who's also linked to last November's terror attacks in Paris. Latraoui escaped after the attack yesterday, but was captured by Belgian police today after a massive manhunt. In the aftermath of the attacks, Europe is scrambling to secure itself against terror, and former Belgian Jewish community leader Joel Rubenfeld is calling on his government to follow Israel's lead in adopting airport security precautions. Rubenfeld says Israel's counter-terrorism measures include a checkpoint 1 kilometer away from Ben Gurion Airport, and says similar measures could be used to improve security at the Brussels airport. The Islamic State has carried out several recent attacks in Europe, and the world's beginning to see it as a major terror threat. What you might not realize is that the Islamic State is a threat that Israel faces every day, and the group is even stationed on several of Israel's borders. The Islamic State has taken up residence in the Golan Heights on Israel's border with Syria, and it just announced it has a new Saudi leader. The Islamic State's branch in the Golan is called Shuhada al-Yarmouk, and it was previously led by a Palestinian from the Yarmouk refugee camp in Syria. While the change in command sounds like a technical detail, it shows the branch isn't just a Palestinian or Syrian organization in the Golan. It's actively working for the Islamic State in carrying out its goals. Unfortunately, the Islamic State isn't only on Israel's northern border. It also has a province in the Sinai near Israel's southern border. And when we say province, that means it's not just a group hanging out in the Egyptian desert. They have a governing system and actually live there. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's probably because the Islamic State in the Sinai is the group that blew up a Russian plane that was flying over the Sinai last November, killing over 200 people. In fact, the Islamic State even wrote about it in its magazine, which is called Dabiq. The Islamic State uses its magazine a lot to write threats to Israel, saying it will destroy the Jewish state. And that's not all. Recent reports say the Hamas terror group in Gaza actively coordinates with the Islamic State. Hamas also pays the Islamic State's group in the Sinai tens of thousands of dollars every month, in exchange for the group's help in smuggling weapons into Gaza to be used against Israel. The Israeli government also claims the Islamic State fighters received treatment at hospitals in Gaza. It seems like the whole world is on edge after the attacks this week in Belgium, as well as the recent terror attacks in Paris. Most of the attacks have been blamed on radical Islam, and a lot of people are starting to ask what's causing radical Muslims to attack European targets, and how can it be stopped? Dr. Mordechai Kedar is a lecturer at Bar-Ilan University and a specialist in radical Islam, and he also spent more than 25 years in the IDF's military intelligence. He's here with us today to help explain what's causing this phenomenon and what we should expect in the future. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
So first of all these terror attacks in Europe, what's causing them? Where are they coming from?
Well, it's very clear, coming from Muslims, radical people who use their ideology in order to topple the West because they don't like the permissiveness and the materialism in the West, and they actually are there in order to spread Islam all over Europe. This is what they say, this is what they mean. However, they have also more, I would say, recent reasons, which are to retaliate against what Europe is doing, yes or no, to the Islamic State or to other Muslims all over the world. So they don't really need good reasons. They have many reasons which they can employ in order to launch these attacks.
Now, I know you've called the war on terror World War III and said it's really the next frontier, and people are just starting to realize that it's happening in Europe. Do you think Europe has actually realized it after the recent attacks in Belgium?
Well, already Ephraim Halevi, the former head of the Mossad, has said this after the September 11, 2001. Means like 15 years ago, he already tried to ring the bell and to wake the world up to see what happens. Unfortunately, the world, at least partially, is still slumbering. And this is the problem, that intelligence organizations still do not cooperate. Even the French and the Belgian have problems to talk to each other and to share information and to exchange information and to analyze information. Look, even the writing of names. Muhammad. There are at least six ways how this name is written in Europe. So the computers cannot combine this Muhammad to the same man in another country because his name is spelled different way. There is no standard how to write these things in Europe. And this is the problem. There's a European Union. They united the currency, they united many other things, but the way how to register people, they don't still have. So this they have to have their act together, I think, to begin with. And then to start thinking, what do they do with such a big immigration which does not become European? These people live in enclaves, and even if they are not jihadists who will go and shoot people, they might help those who shoot people, or host them, or supply whatever they need these people. Of course, they are not jihadists, or all the way jihadists, or hardcore jihadists, but even if they softer core jihadists, they are still dangerous because they support, help, finance, take from place to place, or give shelter to those jihadists. And this is the problem. The infrastructure of the terror in Europe is way much bigger than what Europeans think.
Yeah, it seems like we're seeing that right now, as they're still looking for some of the attackers involved in the Paris attacks and having trouble finding them, and they've gotten a lot of help since
You know, the Europeans have not yet found out how they were communicating with each other. With cell phones, ciphered social media, dark net, all kinds of ways how to communicate without being detected by the surveillance units or whatever of the police and the security of Europeans. This is the problem. Intelligence. And you know, in order to have a good war, you need three things. Intelligence, and intelligence.
I think that is definitely correct. Now, I want to take it back a little bit to the basics, just about Islam in general. In the general discussion right now in the world, a lot of people talk about moderate Islam and radical Islam. You've said there aren't really two kinds, it's just Islam. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
In order to think that there is radical Islam and another Islam, which is moderate Islam, you have to assume that there is radical Quran versus another Quran, which is moderate, or radical Hadith, the old tradition, versus another kind of hadith which is moderate and so forth. There is no such a thing. There is one Quran, there is one hadith in old tradition, and one biography of Muhammad which they derive the precedence for how to behave in any time, in any situation. Every Muslim takes or picks from the Quran and from the hadith and from the Prophet Muhammad's biography what fits his culture. If he is a moderate man, because he grew up in a moderate environment and he internalized the moderate ideas, he will pick from the Quran, from the Hadith, and from the precedents of Muhammad, everything which supports his culture. And he will be a perfect Muslim, yet being moderate. Another Muslim who is radical because of environment or because of education, incitement, whatever, he picks from the Quran the radical verses and the radical ideas from the Hadith and the radical precedents from the Prophet Muhammad biography, and he will tailor his own Islamic garment with these radical materials, and he is also a perfect Muslim. One cannot say that the other one hijacked Islam. Both are basing their teachings and their behavior on the core Islamic sources, the same sources. And this is the problem. There is no radical Islam versus moderate Islam. There are radical Muslims versus moderate Muslims, people, individuals, or organizations. If they organize and group two groups or organizations, so you get Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State on those on the radical side, and there are, if there are moderate people like people in Toronto, for example, Muslims facing tomorrow, a very good, very moderate organization who wouldn't kill a mosquito on the wall also. So, and all are real, good, faithful Muslims, because they base whatever they do on the Islamic sources. And this is only in a nutshell. The radicalization happens, definitely. People who come to Europe in order to become Europeans, their children might be radicalized either because of the mosques or because of the social media or something which they saw in the street or something happened to their family by the police or by somebody, and they get radicalized. They go to the mosque or to other sources, and they internalize their radical verses from the Quran and the radical ideas from the Hadith, and they become radicalized, and their families usually don't like it, because the families who came from the homelands, they usually thank the European host country very, very much because of the house and food and whatever they got from the children is being radicalized.
I want to use that actually to segue into another question. What you're saying about how it's the children that are being radicalized. Sometimes. Okay, it can happen. I guess what I'm asking is, for our final question, what do you think Europe will look like then if nothing changes, if it stays in the current status quo and they're not changing the organizations, not improving intelligence, and you are having this continued radicalization? Will people continue to be radicalized? Will they end up saying, oh, we actually like living here and, let's be moderate? What do you think it will look like?
Two things will determine the future of Europe. First is the immigration. And the second, how this immigration is being treated. Immigration means that there are every year more and more foreigners, especially Muslims, and less Europeans because of birth rate within European societies, the low number of children which they bring to the world, if they bring children to the world. So this is mathematics. This is not a matter of your standpoint. If one population or one group is in increase and the other one is in a decrease, one day it will be bigger. This is one thing. Second thing is how they settle in Europe. So far, many Muslims live in enclaves, and in these neighborhoods of either totally or almost totally Muslim population, they preserve their culture, they preserve the violence, they preserve this disobedience to the law, to the state law. They continue with all kinds of habits and traditions which they brought from the homelands, like honor killings and other kinds of violence, and they actually abuse the European societies, especially the girls. Look what happens with the rates of rape in Stockholm, in Sweden, a city which 20 or 25 years ago didn't know what rape is. Today it became the capital of rape in Europe, and it's not done by Swede men, it's by immigrants who view the girls, the European girls, as easy prey, as permitted to them, because they are not Muslims, they are infidels. So this is the problem, when they come to Europe and they still preserve the culture, the traditions, which they grew up on in their homelands, and they turn Europe actually into an Islamic state, an Islamic country, according to the rules of the Hijrah. Hijrah, as you know, is immigration, but not only to move from a bad place to a better place, but also to spread Islam all over the world, as some of their clerics claim.
Well, it sounds like Europe has a big job on their hands. Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
We told you earlier this week about 19 Jews from Yemen that Israel secretly brought to the Jewish state. They've officially arrived, and we'll give you a look at how they're settling into their new lives in Israel. The 19 Yemenite Jews who were spirited out of the war-torn Yemen in recent days arrived at their new temporary homes at the Nurit Absorption Center in Beersheba. Relatives of the newcomers were on hand to greet them.
Cousins, they came from Yemen. So we're very happy to see them. And they're lucky they came to Israel.
The covert operation rescued some of the last members of one of the world's oldest Jewish communities. One of the new arrivals is Rabbi Salman Dahari, who brought along a 600-year-old Torah scroll that his family has passed down through the generations. Dahari says the Jews who remain in Yemen aren't in imminent danger. Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke in the Knesset and welcomed the new arrivals, but he hasn't given many details about the operation to bring them home.
We לנו גם מחויבות ליהודים שנמצאים באזורי סכנה ורוצים לעלות לישראל. במבצע חשאי שהסתיים הלילה, נמשך מספר שבועות, הועלו לישראל 17 יהודים מתימן, ביניהם 7 ילדים.
And the operation wasn't only significant because of the Jews it brought to Israel, but also because of who planned it. Deputy Minister Ayub Kara is a Druze, and he played a key role in planning the rescue of the Yemenite Jews.
בתקופה של החודשים האחרונים הצלחתי להביא לארץ גורם מאוד חשוב שמשפיע על הקהילה. ישבנו אותו בסודיות ודיסקסנו את כל הנושא הזה, נתנתי להם את כל הגיבוי שבעולם. היום בעצם בשתיקה הצלחנו להביא את השאר, זה בשורה טובה, לפני יום פורים, לפני בעצם סוכות, ואנחנו מחכים בעזרת השם לקהילות היהודיות הבאות, ואנחנו לא ניכנס לפרטים, כי אנחנו גם משם נביא אותם לארץ הקודש, חזרה כאן לירושלים.
Before the operation, Yemenite Jews had complained of experiencing increasing harassment since the rebel movement seized control of Yemen's capital in 2014. 50 Jews have decided to remain in Yemen, including at least 40 living in a compound next to the U.S. Embassy. Most of the 40,000 Jews that made up the ancient community moved to Israel in Operation Magic Carpet in 1949, shortly after the Jewish state was created. When you think of religious Jews in Israel, one of your first thoughts is probably Haredi men praying at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Well, it turns out that's a pretty accurate description, and a new study says Israel's the only country in the world where men pray more than women. A new study by the Pew Research Center says Israel's the only country in the world where more men engage in daily prayer than women. If you're wondering how they came up with that statistic, their study combined more than 2,500 surveys from 192 countries. The studies found that women are generally more religious than men, and 83.4% of women identify with a religious group, compared to 79.9% of men. Women in Christian countries reported going to church more regularly than men, but the opposite's true of Muslim countries and Israel. The study found that in 84 countries, women reportedly pray 8% more than men, and women pray daily more than men in 43 of those countries. It turns out in the rest of the countries, the two genders pray equally, except in Israel, where men reported praying more. In Israel, men also say they attend weekly religious services at a rate that's 19 percentage points higher than women. Interestingly, the study found that American Jewish men are only 3 percentage points more likely to attend weekly services than women. Imagine a future with curtains that could light up a room or darken a window, and 3D printers that can print circuit boards. It might sound like a fantasy, but Israeli nanotechnology has already made these products and more. What they're doing isn't just cool, it might save your life. Israel's Hebrew University of Jerusalem has produced a number of grads that are excelling in the nanotech sector. They've already invented products like 3D printers and threads that are stronger than spider webs. If you're asking yourself why it's important to know they're graduates of the Hebrew University, it's because the research they conducted there is now being turned into actual products that are emerging on the market. For example, the Israeli tech company Nira is working on developing technology that conducts biometric identification based on electromagnetic emissions from sweat ducts. It sounds complicated, but basically this means technology that could be installed in a car's steering wheel to monitor the driver's sweat glands and determine if the driver is too tired or too drunk to drive, which could save lives. The Hebrew University will be holding an advanced materials conference next week with its partner company Yisem, and the partners say it'll show off all of these technologies and more. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Today's word is rosh, which means head in Hebrew. Rosh can literally mean head as in a body part, but it also has a lot of other meanings in Hebrew. It's often combined with words to say someone's in control or the head of something. Rosh is used in Hebrew to describe a lot of government positions. For example, Israel has a prime minister, which is called Rosh HaMemshala, or head of the government. If you want to talk about a mayor, you can say Rosh Ha'ir, or head of the city. Even the Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah, or the Jewish New Year, uses the word to say it's the head or the beginning of the year. Just think of how you'd say head of the house in English and you get the idea. Israelis really understand that the head is in charge of the body, and it's used a lot in Israeli slang. Our personal favorite is hu ochel li et harosh, which literally means he's eating my head. In other words, he's talking me to death. So next time someone's driving you crazy, you can literally imagine them eating your head, and hopefully you'll at least get a laugh out of it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Today it's 72 and sunny in Tel Aviv, and tomorrow's supposed to be even warmer. Tomorrow the high is 82, and it should stay sunny until the weekend. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.84 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to check out our evening update every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.